Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Van Cleve. I'm currently getting a visit from the cat. This is like the welcome to my kitchen. Hopefully the dogs and the children will be quiet for the next 45 minutes. My name is Julie, forester for Richland County. I guess I'll give you a quick background of who I am. Sometimes that helps in the virtual reality that we live in. I'm originally from Mesa, Maine, so southern Wisconsin. I've been working in Richland County for 4 years. I've been working for the DNR for 6 years. Before I was in Richland County, I lived and worked in Madison. This is a great place to live and to be a forester. Maybe, the woods are awesome and the trees are awesome. My background is slightly different than the majority of my coworkers in that I studied forestry in Germany at the University of Freiburg. So I have a degree from there, and then I came back here to find a job and have really enjoyed my career with the DNR so far. So tonight, let's see, I'm going to talk to you guys about management planning, people, and programs that are out there for landowners and their woods. On the next slide here. Being a little slow. Okay. So the first topic we're going to talk about is planning. Why should you get a management plan and what is a management plan? Management plans are really great for a number of reasons. They really help you get what you want from your woods. I think that's probably the most important thing. If you have good goals, they can be written in a way that your goals are achieved at the end of the day. It also helps you have a healthy forest to either maintain the healthy forest that already exists on your property or to improve the forest that you currently have. Probably most forests, at least in Richland County, could be improved. In terms of their health, everybody can kind of get better, and it's not that dissimilar with the trees in the forest. But really a management plan is going to tell you what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. And the when can be a big part of a management plan because forestry, as many of you know, or maybe you have yet to figure out, it takes forever. There's not a lot of things that we do in our lives where we're planning for 25, 50, or 100 years from now. Maybe when you create a will or you're thinking about your mortgage, but really in our day-to-day lives, the 50-year plan is not one that we're always thinking about, but that's kind of, what's different about forestry is that things take a long time. So planning is important because it happens pretty slowly. It can happen slowly. And now, let's see. Oh, I was also going to say that, the time span too is, and management plans are really become crucial when you're managing a property across multiple generations, or even with groups of people like LLCs, or maybe it's siblings, cousins, sometimes big families own land together. And to have one guiding document that kind of solidifies the group's ideas of what they have in mind for what they want from their forest can really help bring a family together when it comes time to make decisions. So what is a management plan? The next couple of slides, I'm going to go over, kind of what really, is included in a management plan and what goes into creating one. So management plans are really the foundation of them is the landowner goals and objectives. They're also, include or are based on the condition of the current forest. So, what's out there now, and then the management plan really, another key element of it is the actions to achieve those goals. In forestry terms, we call actions management practices. So that's something that you'll hear a lot is management practice. And really it just means, the things that are happening on the ground. So that could be cutting trees, that could be, removing invasives, that could be planting trees. All of those things are kind of the actions that we use to achieve the goals. Let's see. The actions that, or the management practices that are included in forest management plans are based on appropriate silvicultural systems. Silviculture is essentially growing a forest, controlling, manipulating a forest in order to achieve a purpose. So, like agriculture, silviculture is essentially growing trees for the end result. And that could be, that maybe is timber, but it might be something else too. It might be, it's whatever your goal is, whether it's aesthetics or a healthy forest or something that supports diverse wildlife. So the point of this is that I'm really just trying to say that the silviculture is based on science, how trees grow with one another, and the actions or the practices that are in the plans are based on these silvicultural systems, so how trees grow with one another. There are a couple of steps that we've outlined to give you guys an idea of what it takes to start a management plan and to create one. The first step, is really getting to know your forest. So if you use your forest, if you can get out there, get into your woods, and just take note of the areas that you use. Maybe that is your favorite hunting stand, or a path you like to walk, a place you like to sit. I always think of the place I would like to put a bench, but never have on my property. Those are the areas you enjoy. And then you can take stock of what you have. So do you have big trees or little trees? Probably most people think I have a lot of trees, but there are differences between a really dense forest and one that you can kind of see through. It's open in the understory. What's growing on the ground? Are there seedlings? Maybe there's invasive brush. There aren't any seedlings. Maybe there's some special flowers in the understory that have some significance. So take stock of what you have as kind of, that's the first step. The second step to getting a management plan is to figure out what your goals are. So, really asking yourself the question, what do you want from your woods? Where do I want to go with this? And it helps to try to be as specific as you can. So, what do you want from your woods, or how do you want to use your woods? Do you want more income? If so, then when? You like to do recreation, but is it cross-country skiing that you're interested in, or is it ATV riding? You're a hunter, but is it, are you hunting for turkeys, or are you hunting for deer? Maybe it's both, and maybe those specific goals will help kind of pave the way for the management, the practices that get added to your forestry plan in the future. Another thing to think about is some potential projects. So, is there an old field you've always wanted to see trees growing in? You're thinking about planting, or, you've got some honeysuckle that's really been bothering you, and you want to get rid of it because it's not supposed to be there. Or maybe you want to do some logging. So think about those potential projects, because the more you can include in your plan when it's written, the more detailed and complete it will be. Step 3, find a forester for guidance. It's really recommended to work with a professional forester. Silviculture is complex. Foresters take classes, probably most of them over years when they go to college in silviculture. And I think you could relate it a little bit to something like auto mechanics. There's a lot of people who are going to change their own oil, but there's not a lot of people who are going to work on their own transmission. So it's really worth your while to have some guidance from a forester. A coworker of mine, he always says, like, I could teach anybody to collect data, forestry data. And I think that's true. You could probably teach a 10-year-old to collect forestry data. But the complexity of combining the decisions with the management activities and how it all fits together can be challenging sometimes. So what do foresters do, when they're writing a management plan? This is a question I've actually been asked a lot in my career. It's like people know that foresters spend time with trees, but they're not exactly sure what all that entails. But in terms of the management plan, what we do is conduct an inventory of the forest. So we're collecting data. We're analyzing the land. Maybe its past use and maybe potential future uses. There's an expert understanding of forest management, or a very in-depth one. And really at the end of the day, foresters are trying to weigh all of those things and find the balance between what it's like right now, so the present condition of the property, what it's capable of producing, and then what you want to get out of it. So data collection is a big part of writing a plan. That's probably why, it costs a little bit of money to do it. So to have a plan written is, usually you hire someone, and we'll get into that a little bit later when I talk about different types of foresters. But it can be, there's a lot of data that goes into a plan. So we've got tree species, individual trees, diameters and heights. From the diameter and height, the foresters can determine the volume of a tree, the volume of timber in each one. So soil type, timber type. So tree species are grouped into types of timber or forest types, like northern hardwoods is a very common forest or timber type in Richland County, and it includes maples, ashes, and basswoods, mainly because those trees grow well together. So they're frequently found together in the woods. Oak hickory is another kind of forest type, central hardwoods, so on and so forth. The age and the health of the forest are measured. The site index is measured. That's a measurement of stand quality. Topography is taken into account. The feasibility, site capability, kind of goes on and on. Historic vegetation, past disturbance. Also, foresters look at historical, cultural, and natural resources that need to be protected. So that's kind of the long list of data that is collected. And then a forester creates a management plan. And I just wanted to give you a couple of snippets of what those plans look like sometimes. Plans really consist of the data that depicts the current state, a map of the property, and then we put the data into words so that normal people can read that, and you don't have to decipher lists like this. So stand descriptions are, descriptions of each spot in your forest that is similar. And those are very helpful for landowners who aren't used to reading forestry data. And then management practices are kind of the last piece of the management plan. So here you can see a bunch of numbers and stuff. And that is always, this is called a stand exam, and it's always at the end of a plan. This is an example of a plan map. So I briefly mentioned this, but trees are frequently lumped into groups. Here I've got my laser pointer, and we call the groups of trees that are similar stands. So stand 1, stand 2, stand 3, stand 4, etc. The stands they usually have similar species, and they're of a similar diameter class. So we put them in different groups of diameters, and then we also note the density of the stand. And that's kind of what this little code is down here. So stand 1 is an oak stand with 15-inch diameter trees and larger. 1 means it's a relatively low density, or there's not that many trees there. Just an example.
Hey, Julie.
Yeah.
I got one question came in through the chat. They're just curious, what's the best time of the year to reach out to a forester, a DNR forester, for an evaluation?
That's a great question. So,
and I put everybody's contact information in the chat feature as well for the service foresters covered by this county's classes, or this session's classes.
Yeah, I think that just to answer that question, one thing that I will hopefully mention more than once in this presentation is your DNR service forester is a great one-stop shop for all your forestry questions. So when in doubt, call up your DNR service forester, and I will go over how to find them. But I'll talk a little bit more about managed forest law and what that means. But I think that it is a good time to, like, anytime's a good time to call somebody to get your forestry management plan written, but you might have to wait because people get booked up. I don't know. I mean, I would say that you would, if you contacted somebody and got on their list, I would expect that they would have it written within 6 months. A year is probably a longer time to wait. When I talk more about managed forest law, Tony, maybe you can remind me this question because it might make more sense to talk about busy times of year then. So can you remind me, Tony?
Yep, we'll do, definitely.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question though. So this is just a blurb. This is the stand information. So this is part of a plan. This is describing that stand one, the oak stand. I just wanted to show people that it wasn't all just numbers. It's both the numbers kind of, so you could give your plan to a forester and they could glean something from it too, but it's also written so that, normal people should be able to understand what's going on in their woods. So the last part of the plan I mentioned a little quickly was the management practices. And that is really the next step in your plan. A lot of times when you get a plan, maybe there will be management practices already included in it. And whether those are, recommendations or, there are probably recommendations at that point, but I think that's a really key time for people to be involved in the process and to sit down with their forester to ask questions. What does this type of harvest mean? Why am I doing a thinning in this year? So, management practices are all tied to dates in your plan, and plans usually cover, 25 or 50 years if it's an MFL. So I think the shortest forest management plans have to cover at least 10 years. So, determining a plan of action, what you're going to do and when you're going to do it is that's an important part of the process, how you're going to achieve your goals or maintain something over time. And these are just some examples of different management practices. So thinning trees, they get too crowded in there, they get stressed out. They're more susceptible to disease and pests. So thinning trees helps keep the forest healthy. Invasives control, sometimes we see that. Regeneration harvests, releasing regeneration, so it's free to grow if it's being overtopped or crowded by some other less desirable plants. So number 5, the last step, put it into practice. You got this plan. They're a little pricey, or they can be, but use your plan. Don't let it sit on a shelf. I think a lot of times the plans get neglected, but keep records of things you've done out there. Update the plan if it needs to be. It's not set in stone. Things can be changed as you go, and I think that they often are, because a lot of times what seemed like a good idea 20 years ago, maybe it's changed, 20 years in the future. But make it a living document, but let it live. I mean, really utilize it, because it really will make things easier. And especially in those multi-generational property situations where you've got or lots of family members, or even just you and your partner, it really helps tie things together and keep track of where you're at. So that's all I have for basic management plans right now. If there's no questions, I will keep going to the next section. The next question is people. Frequently, Tony, you got something? No, you're just popping up. I think that there's a lot of players in the forest industry as far as foresters and loggers are concerned. There's quite a few different types of foresters, and it can get a little confusing. And sometimes it surprises me, but this is what I do for a living. So I'm of course I'm used to it, but sometimes people surprise me not knowing the difference between a forester and a logger. So loggers cut the trees. Foresters are usually not cutting the trees. They're making the plans. And log buyers work for mills and most typically and buy timber. There are some people who are a little bit more like an in-between person, and they facilitate the buying, the process between the buyer and the seller. But it's kind of like also it gets to be a gray area. But Mike Finley, who's also on this call, is going to talk more about logging on Thursday, December 17th. And I think that's going to be really interesting. It's the last topic in this series, so tune in. And I'm going to let him go into detail about logging. But I'm going to talk about types of foresters. So really, when you boil it down, I'd say we have 3 different types of foresters in Wisconsin: the DNR foresters, such as myself, and then 2 different types of foresters that represent the private industry: consulting foresters and industrial foresters. And once again, there are 2 different types of DNR foresters. So this is a more recent change. It used to be everybody just wore all the hats, and now we've split up our responsibilities a little bit. I am a DNR service forester, so in terms of my responsibilities to private landowners, you're kind of one-stop shop. So we do general education and outreach. We provide landowners with property walkthroughs. I'd say that's one of the biggest and probably funnest parts of my job, is that, maybe you just bought land and you're like, oh, I'm thinking about what I want to do. And I don't know, it's big woods. I don't know what I'm doing with it yet. Maybe you want to have a forester out to your property and just talk about things, explore your options. We are also well-versed in all of the cost share programs that are out there. We can talk to you about planning for timber sales, tree plantings, forest improvement projects, really the whole 9 yards, and it's free. So if you haven't taken advantage of a property walkthrough with a forester, I highly, highly recommend it. People always tell me, wow, I can't believe I learned X, Y, Z. I think it's really a great opportunity for landowners to learn something new. And for, foresters, we love to get out on different properties and see things that we'd normally never be able to see. So the woods is always exciting. Second kind of DNR foresters called tax law forestry specialists. Basically, these guys administer the Managed Forest Law program. So that is it in a nutshell. It's not always as simple as just MFL and that's all they do. But if your questions are specific to Managed Forest Law, then this is your go-to group of foresters working for the DNR. And yes, I will go more into Managed Forest Law in a little bit. So 2 groups of private foresters, consulting and industrial foresters. So consulting foresters are just like any consultant. They serve landowners for a fee. They're usually self-employed. Industrial foresters are employed by the wood products industry. And sometimes, depending on what you're having them do, like writing a management plan, but maybe you're hiring somebody to set up a timber sale for you, their fees can sometimes be embedded in like the price they're paying for the timber they're buying off your land. So it's really quite variable. Cooperating foresters includes both consulting and industrial foresters, and a cooperating forester is a group of people who've agreed to comply with the forestry management standards set by the DNR, and they also attend some annual training. So essentially, these people have been vetted to practice sustainable forestry on private landowners' properties. It's a good thing. It's a really, really long list of people too. And like it says here, so it includes people from both the industrial and the consulting side. So you really have just a broad range of service providers. And a certified plan writer is somebody who writes MFL plans. And I included it on this slide because the consulting and the cooperating and the CPWs, we like our acronyms, sometimes get all confused and jumbled up in people's heads. So there it all is on one piece of paper, and maybe that helps. What to look for in a forester. So when you're going out there shopping for foresters, you know, what do you need to think about? It's really like, you know, any other service. If you have options, right, take advantage of your options. Call a couple people, you know, I think most people give you references if you ask. Talk about how they're going to charge you for the, you know, get a quote for whatever you're asking them to do. You know, if it's plan writing, compare the cost of the, you know, what is it going to cost me to have the plan written? Some people charge by per acre. Sometimes they have flat rates plus hourlies. It's variable. So get some prices. But more importantly, I think than those things is find somebody who is vested in you, someone who you can talk to, you know, someone you can trust. So maybe they think like you do about your woods, or maybe you can just tell they're really listening when you tell them what's important to you. But find someone you can trust. And how do I find them? This is my big plug for the DNR's Forestry Assistance Locator. It's newly improved. I really like it a lot. It works well. It is on the internet. So, you know, that's like, there's probably a paper copy out there too. If you call your forester and ask, they can send you a paper copy, but it's a very streamlined, functional way to look for people. And you can search by service, and you can search by types of forester, and all the types of foresters are explained on this website. So if you're looking for someone, I highly recommend visiting the DNR's webpage and searching the Forestry Assistance Locator. So last segment here to kind of wrap things up, programs. I'm going to try to keep it brief. I think that, you know, depending on where you're at, sometimes less is more with programs. Once again, if you are interested in enrolling in a program, whether it's managed forest law or a cost sharing program, contact a forester, because this is meant to be an intro, and I'm sure we could all talk about everything for a lot longer than we have tonight, but this is a brief overview. So there's two different types of programs that are out there: state programs and federal programs. So I'm going to start with the state ones and talk about managed forest law. So hopefully I'll answer these questions in the next couple minutes as we go here. But what is MFL? Why should I participate? How do I enroll? You know, what's the commitment? What does it cost? Or maybe better said, how much can I save? And who else can I talk to? So managed forest law is an incentive program that encourages sustainable forestry on private property by offering people a tax break. So you're going to pay less in your property taxes when you follow your forestry management plan. And the commitment, I just wanted to add to that managed forest law, you know, one of the primary goals is really to produce forest products through sustainable management. So harvesting trees is not always, but often a part of this program. The primary goal is timber production, and there are secondary goals like, you know, your goals and objectives that are also incorporated into your MFL plan, but doing sustainable, you know, harvesting is definitely part of the program. So the MFL commitment is either 25 or 50 years. That's how long your plan goes for. And the plan determines the practices that landowners must complete. So it's essentially a forest management plan like I was showing you at the top of the hour, but the management isn't really, it's not recommendations. Most of them are mandatory. And land is either designated as opened or closed. Open it means open to the public, and closed is closed to the public. I think you can close up to 320 acres. A common misconception of managed forest law is that in order to be enrolled in it, you have to have your property open to the public, and that's not true. So you have the two options, and probably, at least in Richland County, I would say 95% of managed forest law lands are closed to the public. And that's not a statistic, that's a feeling, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was much less than that. So quick eligibility: in order to be eligible, you have to have at least 20 contiguous acres. At least 80% of the forest has to be productive forest. So there is some leeway in managed forest law to have some parts of your property where maybe your goal isn't timber production. You know, maybe it's that, you know, great deer bedding area that you don't want anybody to go into, or that really nice oak knob that you just think is so beautiful you could never imagine changing it. But there's some leeway in there. Other things not part of a subdivision can't be tax delinquent, and there's can't be any buildings on lands that are enrolled now or recently. How much do I save? I think the savings are pretty big. I've highlighted a couple numbers here, and I just included it all so you'd have some more information. But open land is taxed really similarly to agricultural land at $2 an acre. Enclosed land is $10 an acre. That closed land is 20% of the statewide average tax on productive forest lands. It seems like that tax category is one of, I don't know if it's the highest, but it's one of the highest categories of property taxes that there is. And I know in Richland County, you're paying more like $45 to $55 an acre for productive forest lands. So the savings are really quite huge. So if you have more MFL questions, you know, talk to your DNR tax law forestry specialist. And once again, you can find those people for your county on the forestry assistance locator. Okay, cost share programs. Contact your DNR service forester for more information, is what I'm going to say there. I'm going to talk a little bit about common practices, and then I'm going to give you a really brief overview of 3 or 4 different types of cost share programs. So things that are very commonly cost shared is tree planting, so afforestation, starting new trees, invasive plant control, forest stewardship plan development. So, you know, if you need to have a forestry management plan written, you can offset that cost through applying for one of these programs. Forest improvement practices. So we do a lot of cutting down ironwood, which is an understory tree that kind of takes up a lot of space in the woods in order to let more desirable tree species grow. That's a really common thing in Richland County. Crop tree release is another one. So if you have a plantation and things are getting a little tight in there, it looks like the trees are running out of room to grow. Crop tree release is where we foresters usually help you identify which trees are your crop trees, and then you release them by cutting some of their neighbors so that they have more room to grow for the next 10 or 15 years. Most of these practices you can do with all of the cost share programs that I'll be mentioning in the upcoming slides. So really what you're doing remains the same, and how you do it or who you go through is the thing that changes. So WFLGAP, WFLGP, Wisconsin Forest Landowner Grant Program. We love our acronyms with these cost share programs. It's awful, but I can't change it. So this is one of our most common programs, probably one of the biggest forestry cost share programs in the state. In Richland County, annually, we fund probably 35 to 50 landowners through this grant program. So it's really big. Down here, the goal of this program is to assist people with protecting and enhancing their woodlands. It's a pretty it's a pretty cool goal, I think. You know, it's basically giving people money or an incentive to do things that would otherwise cost them money. It reimburses landowners up to 50% of the cost of eligible practices. You need to have 10 to 500 acres in order to be eligible in Wisconsin, and you have to have a forestry stewardship plan in place before you can receive funding for this program. And that's true for a lot of the cost sharing programs. The forest management plan is kind of the first step to getting funding for something else, for a different project. And it's really also only eligible for non-commercial practices, which is also true for some of the other programs. So if you're making money by cutting timber, let's say, then, or maybe you're thinning your woods and you were able to sell the pulp, then you're not eligible for assistance through these cost share programs. Applications for this one are first come, first serve. You can submit them any time. It's a pretty simple process. Majority of the plans are funded each year in August, and you have 2 years to complete the projects, which is a pretty good amount of time. So now I'm going to dive a little bit into some federal programs. Federal programs are also great. They really offer a wide range of possibilities and an even broader scope of things you can do, because a lot of the federal programs aren't just for forests, but they have maybe more of an agricultural background. And so, you know, some landowners might know this EQIP program, for example, because of something they've done in the past with, you know, some agricultural field they had and not with their forest. But the EQIP, this is probably the biggest NRCS program, at least that I'm aware of down here, environmental quality incentives program, and it helps landowners carry out practices that improve water quality, reduce soil erosion, create wildlife habitat. The program is more focused on what they call like resource concerns. So they want to prevent things from going bad, I guess. There's, lots of the same things can be funded, but the costs, the reimbursement is supposed to be around 75%. It's not something where it's all flat rates, so they're not going to pay you 75% of every invoice you turn in, but that's how the costs are calculated from the beginning. And so in theory, this program might be a little bit more lucrative than the state's program, WIFLGEP, but the application process is maybe a little bit more time consuming, and there's some more paperwork to fill out. So it's really, it depends on the situation, which one is necessarily, better, but they're both great programs. CSP is another one, Conservation Stewardship Program, also managed by NRCS, same as EQIP is. So NRCS is Natural Resource Conservation Service, and it's part of the USDA. And this one, really the goal of CSP is to provide assistance to landowners who are already engaged. They're already practicing, good forestry on their property, and they're willing to put another 5 years in. So this is a 5-year cost share program. It's really quite lucrative because the minimum payment is $1,500 a year. That's each year for 5 years. And then there's more money for different practices. So whatever you are doing is going to also give you some sort of there's a cost share for that, and $1,500 is kind of the base rate. And CSP is really very broad in terms of things you can sign up for, because there's just, I think there's like hundreds of practices. I mean, there's so many, they call them enhancements, but there's so many things you can do to both open areas. I think they even have practices for farmsteads, for maintaining buildings and stuff. So it's really a very broad program. For CSP and EQIP, the experts on these programs are the people that I would say administer them, and that's the district conservationists for NRCS, and DNR foresters usually work hand in hand with those people in their counties. So certainly you could always start with a DNR forester for more information, but you could also go directly to a district conservationist if you knew you were interested in one of these two programs. And the last one here is CRP. CRP has been around for a long time. Common around here to see old CRP plantations, new ones as well. It seems like they used to be a lot more popular than they are now, but CRP is the Conservation Reserve Program. It's managed by FSA, Farm Service Agency, which is also part of USDA. So many letters, I'm sorry. But they pay you basically a yearly rent for taking your fields that are highly erodible out of being cropped and putting them into something else like trees or grasses. And usually the contracts are 10 or 15 years. So that's the bare bones of that program. And that's all, folks. That's the quick rundown. Hopefully it wasn't too fast, but I wanted to get it all in and still have time for questions.